Cold rain hammered the asphalt as Briar ran through the darkness with her 4-month-old son pressed against her chest. Behind her was the husband who had turned love into a prison. Ahead of her was nothing but empty highway and the certainty that she would be found. Then headlights appeared in her rear-view mirror, not the erratic swerving of her husband's rage, but the calm, predatory crawl of a black-armored SUV following her at a distance that felt like a promise. The window lowered. A man's face emerged from the shadows. Sharp gray eyes, a tailored black coat, and the kind of stillness that only dangerous men possessed. "The men hunting you are 2 miles back," he said. "Get in if you want your son alive by sunrise." His name was Dante Moretti, and everyone who mattered knew exactly what that meant. If you want to know whether Briar survives the night and what happens when a mafia boss becomes the only thing standing between a mother and the monster she married, stay with this story until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Swatgate. Briar's hand shook so violently on the steering wheel that the car drifted across the center line before she jerked it back. Rain pounded the windshield in sheets that the wipers couldn't keep up with. The highway stretched empty in both directions. Nothing but darkness and the faint glow of her headlights cutting through the storm. Knox whimpered against her chest where she'd strapped him beneath her jacket. 4 months old, too small to understand that his mother was driving toward nowhere with no plan and no money, and a cell phone she'd thrown out the window 3 miles back because Wesley tracked everything. Everything. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe through the panic that kept clawing up from her stomach. The black SUV appeared in her mirror without warning. Briar's foot slammed the gas pedal. The sedan lurched forward, engine screaming, but the SUV didn't speed up. It just followed, steady, patient, like it had all the time in the world. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She couldn't outrun it. The car was falling apart. She'd heard the grinding noise in the transmission for the last 10 miles. Wesley's security team drove vehicles built like tanks. This was some rusted Toyota she'd stolen from the grocery store parking lot because it was the only one with keys left in the ignition. Stupid, desperate, the only choice she had. The SUV's headlights filled her mirror, blinding her. Then they dimmed. The vehicle pulled alongside her in the empty left lane, matching her speed exactly. Briar's breath caught. The tinted window lowered halfway. A man sat in the back seat, his face partially hidden in shadow. What she could see made her stomach drop. Not because he looked violent, but because he looked calm, controlled, like he'd done this 100 times before. "Pull over," he said. His voice cut through the rain and the roar of her failing engine like he was sitting right beside her. Briar shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't." "You don't have a choice." He gestured toward her rearview mirror. "You see those headlights behind us?" She looked. 2 sets of lights, maybe a mile back. Coming fast. Her chest constricted. "Wesley's men. They'll reach you in 4 minutes," the man continued. "And when they do, you know exactly what happens next." She did know. Wesley had made it very clear the last time she'd tried to leave. He'd locked her in the bedroom for 3 days with no food and a bucket in the corner until she apologized. That was before Knox was born. Now there was a baby involved. Now Wesley had started looking at Knox with that empty expression that made Briar's skin crawl. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who's going to ask you one time." The man leaned forward slightly, and the passing streetlight caught his face. Sharp cheekbones, gray eyes that looked silver in the rain, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Get in my car or don't. But make the decision fast because I'm not dying on this highway for someone who won't save herself." Briar's hands were numb on the wheel. Knox squirmed against her ribs, his tiny fist pressing into her collarbone. The headlights behind them were closer now. She looked at the man one more time. He didn't smile, didn't try to reassure her, just waited with the kind of patience that felt more terrifying than Wesley's rage because it meant he didn't care either way. But Wesley's men were 30 seconds behind her, and this stranger was the only other option. Briar jerked the wheel right, tires screaming as she swerved onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed against the undercarriage. The SUV pulled in front of her, smooth and controlled, and stopped. She killed the engine, grabbed the diaper bag from the passenger seat, shoved the door open and stumbled into the rain with Knox clutched against her chest. The back door of the SUV swung open before she reached it. "Get in." She climbed inside. The door slammed shut behind her. The interior smelled like leather and rain and something sharp. Cologne, maybe, or gunpowder. She couldn't tell. The man sat across from her on the opposite seat, still watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Seatbelt," he said. Briar fumbled with the buckle, her hand shaking too hard to grip it properly. Knox started crying, a thin, exhausted wail that made her chest ache. The SUV pulled back onto the highway before she got the seatbelt clicked. She looked out the rear window just as two black sedans roared past her abandoned Toyota, lights blazing. They didn't stop. They kept going, hunting for her somewhere up ahead. Briar pressed her face against Knox's head and tried not to sob. "He's going to find me," she whispered. The man didn't answer immediately. He reached forward and pressed a button on the console. "Marco, 30 seconds behind us." A voice crackled through the speaker. "I see them. Make it clean. Copy." The man released the button and leaned back, his expression unchanged. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the SUV was warm and quiet, except for Knox's crying. "What does that mean?" Briar asked. Her voice came out hoarse. "Make it clean?" "It means those men won't be reporting back to your husband tonight." Her stomach twisted. "You're going to kill them?" "No." He looked at her for a long moment. "But they're going to spend the next 6 hours lost on back roads with slashed tires and no cell service. By the time they figure out where they are, you'll be somewhere they can't reach." Briar stared at him. She didn't know if that was better or worse than the alternative. "Who are you?" she asked again. "Dante Moretti." The name hit her like cold water. She'd heard it before, whispered in the background of news broadcasts, mentioned in hushed tones by Wesley's business associates when they thought she wasn't listening. A name that made men uncomfortable. "You're—" "Yes." Briar looked down at Knox, whose crying had softened into exhausted hiccups. She was sitting in a car with a man whose name was synonymous with organized crime. A man who controlled entire industries through violence and fear. And somehow, that felt safer than going home. "Why did you stop for me?" she whispered. Dante's expression didn't change. "Because I happened to be driving this road tonight. And because I know what men like your husband do when they're angry." "You don't know anything about my husband." Wesley Caro, 43, CEO of Caro Capital Management, owns a house in Belmont Heights with surveillance cameras on every door and reinforced locks on the bedroom windows. Dante's voice stayed level, factual. "You've called the police 4 times in the last 2 years. Every report was withdrawn within 24 hours. The last time you tried to leave was 7 months ago. You made it to your sister's apartment in Richmond before he found you." Briar's breath stopped. "How do you, Because men like Wesley have patterns. And people like me pay attention to patterns." She wanted to ask what that meant. She wanted to demand answers. But Knox had finally fallen asleep against her chest, his small body warm and trusting, and she was so tired she could barely think straight. The SUV turned onto a side road. Trees closed in on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. The rain softened to a steady patter against the roof. "Where are you taking me?" Briar asked quietly. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting tonight." Dante glanced at Knox, then back at her. "You can leave whenever you want. But if you walk out that door before I say it's clear, you won't make it 3 miles before Wesley's people find you." Briar's throat tightened. She hated that he was right, hated that she had no leverage, no options, no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. But Knox was asleep, and for the first time in 4 months, nobody was screaming at her. She closed her eyes and tried to pretend she'd made the right choice. "Kit." The estate appeared through the trees like something out of a nightmare. Iron gates, high stone walls, security lights that cut through the darkness in sharp white beams. The SUV rolled through the entrance, and Briar heard the gates clang shut behind them with a finality that made her chest tighten. The driveway curved through manicured gardens and past a fountain that looked like it belonged in a museum. The house itself was enormous. 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows, lit from within by warm golden light that should have felt welcoming but somehow didn't. The SUV stopped beneath a covered portico. Dante opened his door and stepped out into the rain without waiting for her. Briar hesitated. Knox stirred against her chest, still asleep. She could stay in the car, refuse to move, demand to be taken somewhere else. Except she had nowhere else to go. She climbed out. The cold air hit her immediately, cutting through her wet clothes and making her shiver. Dante was already walking toward the front entrance, his coat billowing behind him. "Wait," Briar called. He stopped but didn't turn around. "I need to know what you want from me." Now Dante looked back at her. The security lights cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. "I don't want anything from you," he said. "Nobody helps someone for nothing." "Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people." He gestured toward the house. "There are women inside who will help you get cleaned up. Food, if you're hungry. A room with a lock on the inside of the door. You can stay as long as you need to." Briar's hands tightened around Knox. "And then what? Then you decide what happens next." "That's it? That's it." She didn't believe him. Nobody gave shelter to a stranger without expecting something in return. But she was soaked through, exhausted, and holding a baby who needed to be fed and changed and kept warm. So she followed him inside. The entrance hall took her breath away. Marble floors, a curved staircase that swept up to the second floor, paintings on the walls that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Everything was pristine and expensive and completely intimidating. A woman appeared from a side hallway, late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress and an expression that was neither warm nor cold, just watchful. "Mrs. Chen," Dante said, "this is Briar. She and her son will be staying in the East Wing." Mrs. Chen's gaze moved to Knox, and something softened in her face. "The baby looks cold." "I'm fine," Briar said automatically. Then she realized how stupid that sounded. She was shivering hard enough that her teeth chattered. "We're fine. You're soaked through." Mrs. Chen stepped closer, her movements careful and deliberate. "Let me take you upstairs. There's a bathroom with a shower and clean towels. I'll bring formula if you need it." "I don't—" Briar stopped. She did need it. Her milk had dried up weeks ago from stress and malnutrition, and the last bottle she'd managed to give Knox was hours ago. "Yes, thank you." Mrs. Chen nodded and gestured toward the staircase. Briar looked back at Dante, who was already walking away toward another hallway. "Wait," she called after him. He paused. "Why are you doing this?" For a long moment, Dante didn't answer. He stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid beneath his coat. "Because someone should have done it for my sister," he said finally, "and nobody did." Then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Briar standing alone in the entrance hall with Mrs. Chen and a sleeping baby and more questions than answers. The room was bigger than the entire apartment Briar had shared with Wesley before they got married. A king-sized bed with white linens, a sitting area with a couch and bookshelves, windows that overlooked the gardens, currently dark and rain-streaked, a bathroom with marble counters, and a shower that looked like it could fit 4 people. Mrs. Chen had brought clean clothes, soft cotton pajamas that were too big but warm, and a bassinet for Knox. She'd also brought formula, diapers, baby wipes, and a small plate of food that Briar was too nauseous to eat. Now Briar sat on the edge of the bed, holding Knox while he slept, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd run from Wesley. She'd gotten into a car with a stranger. That stranger was a mafia boss whose name made people nervous, and now she was sitting in a mansion that probably had more security than a federal prison. Her hands were still shaking. Knox stirred, his face scrunching up like he might cry. Briar rocked him gently, whispering the same nonsense words she always did when he got fussy. Slowly, he settled. She looked down at his tiny face. So small, so perfect, so completely dependent on her to keep him safe. And she'd already failed him. She should have left Wesley years ago, before the wedding, before Knox was born, before everything became so tangled and suffocating that she couldn't remember what her life had looked like before him. But she hadn't, because Wesley had been charming at first, sweet, generous. He'd bought her expensive gifts and taken her to fancy restaurants and told her she was beautiful. He'd made her feel special. And then, slowly, he'd made her feel trapped. It started small. Questions about where she'd been, who she'd talked to, why she hadn't answered his text messages fast enough. Then it escalated. checking her phone, tracking her location, telling her she couldn't see her friends anymore because they were bad influences. By the time she realized what was happening, she had no money, no car, no way out. Getting pregnant had been the final nail in the coffin. Wesley had smiled when she told him, kissed her forehead, said all the right things, but that night he'd installed cameras in every room except the bathroom. And after Knox was born, the real nightmare began. Briar closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe through the memories. She couldn't afford to fall apart now. Not when Knox needed her to be strong. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse. Mrs. Chen entered carrying a tray with tea and toast. She set it on the side table and glanced at Knox. "He's sleeping well," she observed. "For now," Mrs. Chen nodded. She didn't smile, but there was something almost gentle in her expression. "You should eat something." "I'm not hungry." "You need your strength." Mrs. Chen's tone left no room for argument. "The baby needs you healthy." Briar wanted to argue, but she was so tired, and Mrs. Chen was right, and the toast smelled good. She shifted Knox carefully and reached for a piece. "How long have you worked here?" Briar asked quietly. 15 years. "And Mr. Moretti, is he—" She didn't know how to finish the question. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change. "Mr. Moretti is a complicated man, but he keeps his word. If he says you're safe here, you're safe." "Even from my husband?" "Especially from your husband." Briar set the toast down, her appetite gone. "Wesley has money, connections. He knows people who can—" "Mr. Moretti knows different people." Mrs. Chen picked up the empty cup and placed it back on the tray. "Get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning." She left before Briar could ask anything else. The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows and Knox's soft breathing. Briar lay back on the bed, still holding her son, and stared at the ceiling. She'd escaped Wesley, but she had no idea what she'd just walked into. Osan. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Knox crying. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft. The room was too big. Then the memories crashed back. The highway, the rain, Dante Moretti's gray eyes watching her like she was a problem he'd already solved. Briar sat up too fast, her vision swimming. Knox's cries intensified. She fumbled for him in the bassinet beside the bed, her hands clumsy with sleep. "Shh, baby. I'm here. I'm here." She changed his diaper with the supplies Mrs. Chen had left, then mixed formula in one of the bottles. Knox latched onto it immediately, his small fists curling against her chest. Briar looked around the room in the daylight. Everything looked even more expensive than it had last night. Thick curtains, hardwood floors, artwork on the walls that probably belonged in a gallery. She felt completely out of place. There was a soft knock on the door. Before she could answer, it opened slightly, and a young woman peeked inside. Maybe mid-20s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater. "Sorry," the woman said. "Mrs. Chen asked me to check if you needed anything." "I'm fine." Briar shifted Knox higher on her shoulder. "Who are you?" "Sophia. I help out around the house." She stepped inside, her movements careful. "There's breakfast downstairs if you're hungry, or I can bring something up?" Briar's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten anything except half a piece of toast since yesterday afternoon. "Downstairs is fine," she said quietly. Then she looked down at herself, still wearing the borrowed pajamas, her hair a tangled mess. "I should probably." "You look fine." Sophia smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that made Briar's chest tighten. Nobody had looked at her like that in years, like she was a person instead of a problem. "Come on. I'll show you where everything is." Briar followed her into the hallway, Knox still nestled against her shoulder. The house looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more lived in. They passed several closed doors and a sitting room with more expensive furniture before reaching a wide staircase. Voices drifted up from below. Men's voices, low and serious. Sophia glanced at her. "Don't worry, they're just Dante's people. They won't bother you." "His people?" "Security, staff, whatever you want to call them." Sophia started down the stairs. "Most of them are harmless. A few of them are, well, not harmless. But they know the rules." "What rules?" "Nobody touches anyone staying in this house without permission." Sophia's voice went flat. And nobody asked questions. Briar wanted to ask what that meant, but they'd reached the bottom of the stairs, and suddenly there were people everywhere. Men in dark suits standing near the windows. A woman in a chef's coat emerging from what must be the kitchen. Another woman, older, with short gray hair, sitting on a couch reading a newspaper. Everyone looked up when Briar entered. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched until Sophia cleared her throat. This is Briar. She and her son are staying in the East Wing. The woman on the couch nodded slowly. Welcome. One of the men near the window, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his jaw, gave her a quick once-over and then looked away. Briar held Knox tighter. Thank you. Sophia led her through a set of double doors into a dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. Sunlight poured through tall windows overlooking the gardens. A breakfast spread was laid out on the sideboard. Eggs, bacon, fruit, pastries, coffee. Briar's mouth watered. Sit wherever, Sophia said. I'll grab a high chair for the baby. He's too small for a high chair. Then I'll grab some pillows. Briar sat down carefully, Knox still in her arms. She tried to tell herself this was normal, that eating breakfast in a mansion with a Mafia Boss's staff was somehow a reasonable thing to be doing. It didn't work. Sophia returned with a nest of pillows and helped Briar settle Knox into them on the chair beside her. Then she filled a plate with food and set it in front of Briar without asking what she wanted. Eat, Sophia said gently. You look like you haven't had a real meal in weeks. She hadn't. Briar picked up a fork and forced herself to take a bite. The eggs were perfect, fluffy and seasoned just right. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food hit her stomach. She ate mechanically, her eyes on Knox the entire time. Where's Mr. Moretti? She asked quietly. Meeting. Sophia poured coffee into a mug and set it beside Briar's plate. He'll be back later. Does he live here? Most of the time. Briar looked around the enormous dining room. Who else lives here? Sophia hesitated. It varies. Right now, probably 8 people full-time, another dozen who come and go. That's a lot of people. It's a big house. Briar wanted to ask more questions, but Knox started fussing. She abandoned her plate and picked him up, rocking him gently while he squirmed against her shoulder. Sophia watched for a moment. How old is he? 4 months. He's beautiful. Briar's throat tightened. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while. Briar finished her coffee with one hand while holding Knox with the other. Outside, birds moved through the gardens. Everything felt surreal. Too quiet, too calm, too safe. She kept waiting for something terrible to happen. I need to ask you something, Briar said finally. Sophia looked up. Why does Mr. Moretti do this? The shelter. The protection. Briar glanced at Knox. Why help people like me? Sophia's expression shifted. Something sad and old passing through her eyes. Because he knows what it's like to lose someone, she said quietly. And he refuses to let it happen again. Before Briar could ask what that meant, the double doors opened and Dante Moretti walked in. He looked exactly the same as last night, tailored black suit, sharp gray eyes, expression unreadable. But in the daylight, Briar could see details she'd missed before. The faint lines around his eyes, the scar through his eyebrow, the way he moved like every step was calculated. Good morning, he said. Briar stood automatically, clutching Knox against her chest. Good morning. Dante's gaze moved to the baby, then back to her face. You slept well? Yes. Thank you. He nodded once, then he looked at Sophia. I need to speak with Briar alone. Sophia stood immediately. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything. She left. The doors closed behind her with a soft click. Dante walked to the sideboard and poured himself coffee, moving with the kind of ease that came from being completely comfortable in his own space. Briar stayed frozen by the table, her heart hammering. Sit down, Dante said without looking at her. She sat. He turned and leaned against the sideboard, coffee mug in hand, watching her with those unsettling gray eyes. Your husband filed a missing persons report this morning, he said calmly. Police are looking for you. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and a danger to the baby. Briar's stomach dropped. That's not... I know. Dante's voice stayed level. He's also contacted private security firms. Offered a substantial reward for information leading to your location. How do you know all this? Because I have people who monitor these things. He took a sip of coffee. Wesley Caro is a predictable man, angry, entitled, used to getting what he wants. Briar's hands shook. He's going to find me. No, Dante set his mug down. He's not. You don't understand. Wesley has connections, money, he has nothing I'm afraid of. Dante's tone didn't change, but something in his expression hardened. You're under my protection now. That means nobody touches you without going through me first. Briar stared at him. Why would you do that? I already told you. Because of your sister. Dante's jaw tightened. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the gardens. My sister's name was Isabella, he said quietly. She was 23 when she married a man named Victor Castellano. He was charming, successful, everything she thought she wanted. Briar's chest tightened. 2 years into the marriage, she called me, Dante continued. Said she needed help, that Victor had become violent, that she was afraid. He paused. I told her to wait, he said, his voice flat. I was in the middle of a business negotiation, something that felt more important at the time. I told her I'd come get her as soon as I was finished. The silence stretched. By the time I got there, she was dead, Dante finished. Victor had beaten her to death in their kitchen while I was negotiating a shipping contract. Briar couldn't breathe. So when I see women like you, Dante said, still staring out the window, running from men like your husband with babies in their arms and nowhere to go, he turned to face her. I don't hesitate. Tears burned Briar's eyes. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Dante's expression was cold, hard. Just decide if you're going to let Wesley Caro destroy your life or if you're going to fight back. Briar looked down at Knox, who had finally fallen asleep against her chest. His tiny face was peaceful, trusting. She thought about Wesley's empty eyes staring at the bassinet. She thought about locked bedroom doors and bruises hidden under long sleeves and the slow suffocation of being trapped with someone who smiled in public and screamed in private. She thought about what would happen if she went back. I want to fight, she whispered. Dante nodded once. Then we have work to do. He crossed the room and sat down across from her at the table. When he spoke again, his voice was all business. First, we need to establish that you're not mentally unstable. That means medical records, witness statements, documentation of abuse. Do you have any of that? Briar shook her head. Then we'll build it from scratch. Dante pulled out his phone and made a note. Second, we need to prove Wesley is a threat. That's easier. The police reports you filed will work. Third, we need to make sure he can't touch you legally or physically. How? Leave that to me. Dante looked up. But I need you to do something first. What? Stop being afraid of him. Briar's breath caught. I can't just... Yes, you can. Dante's voice was firm. Because as long as you're afraid, he still controls you. And as long as he controls you, you'll never be free. Briar wanted to argue, wanted to explain that fear wasn't something she could just turn off. But looking at Dante's eyes, cold, certain, absolutely unbending, she realized something. He wasn't asking her to stop being afraid. He was telling her that fear wasn't an excuse anymore. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Dante repeated. He stood. Mrs. Chen will help you settle in. Stay inside the estate grounds for now. Don't contact anyone from your old life. I'll handle the rest. He walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, he said without turning around. What? You made the right choice last night. His voice was quiet. Getting in the car. Then he left. Briar sat alone at the table, holding her sleeping son, and tried to believe him. Atchemt. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended kind of peace. Briar stayed in the East Wing with Knox, venturing out only for meals and brief walks through the gardens when the weather cleared. The estate was larger than she'd realized. Acres of manicured lawns, stone pathways, a greenhouse full of orchids. She met more of the staff. A man named Marco who ran security and barely spoke. A woman named Elena who cooked meals and hummed old songs under her breath. Another woman, younger, maybe early 20s, named Ava, who smiled too brightly and avoided eye contact. Nobody asked questions. Nobody demanded explanations. It should have felt safe. Instead, Briar felt like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the fourth morning, she woke to the sound of shouting. She bolted upright, heart hammering. Knox started crying immediately, startled by her sudden movement. Briar grabbed him and pressed herself against the headboard, listening. Men's voices. Raised, angry, coming from somewhere downstairs. She should stay in her room, lock the door, hide. But the voices were getting louder, and one of them sounded horribly, sickeningly familiar. No, it couldn't be. Briar climbed out of bed and crept to the door. Knox clutched against her chest. She opened it slowly and peered into the hallway. Empty. The shouting continued from downstairs, sharp, violent, echoing through the house. She recognized that voice now. Wesley. Her entire body went cold. He'd found her. Briar's legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen in the hallway, with Knox pressed against her chest, his cries muffled by her shirt, while Wesley's voice ripped through the house like a blade. I know she's here. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't have people watching this place? Another voice responded, lower, calmer. Dante. You need to leave. I'm not leaving without my wife and son. Wesley's voice cracked on the last word, shifting from rage to something that might have sounded like desperation if Briar didn't know better. She's not well. She needs help. Medical help. She needs to be away from you. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know enough. Briar forced herself to move. One step, then another. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor as she crept toward the top of the staircase. Knox had stopped crying, sensing her fear the way babies did, his small body rigid against her ribs. She reached the railing and looked down. The entrance hall was full of men. Wesley stood near the front door, still wearing his expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his face twisted into an expression of righteous fury that Briar recognized too well. Behind him were 3 men in private security uniforms, built like walls, hands resting on their belts where weapons probably lived. Dante stood between Wesley and the rest of the house, perfectly still, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Marco flanked him on the left. 2 other men Briar didn't recognize flanked him on the right. Nobody was pointing guns. Yet. Mr. Caro, Dante said, his voice carrying the kind of patience that felt more dangerous than shouting. I'm going to give you one opportunity to walk out of here before this becomes a problem you can't solve with lawyers. Wesley laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You're threatening me. Do you have any idea who I am? Yes. Then you know I have connections, resources. I can make your life very difficult. You're welcome to try. Wesley's jaw clenched. Briar could see the vein pulsing in his temple from 30 feet away. She'd learned to read that vein years ago. It was the warning sign before he exploded. Where is she? Wesley demanded. Not here. Bullshit. Wesley took a step forward. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket. Wesley froze. I tracked her phone to this address before she threw it away. I know she came here. Then your information is outdated. Stop lying to me! Wesley's voice rose to a shout. Briar, I know you can hear me. Come down here right now. Briar's heart slammed against her ribs. Knox whimpered. She pressed her hand over his mouth gently, trying to muffle the sound. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't let him know you're here. Mr. Caro. Dante's voice cut through the air like a knife. You're disturbing the peace of my home. Leave now or be removed. I'm not going anywhere without my family. You don't have a family here. Wesley's face went red. She's my wife. That's my son. You have no right to keep them from me. I have every right to protect people who ask for protection. Protection from what? I'm her husband. Exactly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Wesley stared at Dante, his chest heaving. You son of a... Choose your next words carefully, Dante interrupted. His voice hadn't changed, still calm, still level, but something in his posture shifted, something that made even Wesley's security team look nervous. Because the only reason you're still standing in my house is professional courtesy. And I'm running out of courtesy very quickly. Briar's fingers dug into Knox's back. She should go downstairs, show herself, end this before it turned into bloodshed. But her body wouldn't obey. Because she knew what would happen if Wesley saw her. He'd smile. put on his concerned husband face, tell everyone she was sick, unstable, a danger to herself and their child. He'd done it before. Convinced her own mother that Briar was having a nervous breakdown, that she needed help, that Wesley was the only one keeping her together. And everyone had believed him, because Wesley was charming, successful, respectable, and Briar was just his hysterical wife. "This isn't over," Wesley said finally, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "I'll be back with the police, with lawyers, with whatever it takes to get my family back." "Good luck with that." Wesley's hands curled into fists. For a moment, Briar thought he might actually swing at Dante, but one of his security guards put a hand on his shoulder, whispering something too low for Briar to hear. Wesley shook him off. "You're making a mistake, Moretti. A big one. I rarely make mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes." Wesley's smile was cold, vicious. "And I'm very good at finding them." He turned and walked toward the door. His security team followed. The door opened, then slammed shut with enough force to rattle the chandelier. Silence flooded the entrance hall. Briar sagged against the railing, her legs trembling so badly she could barely stand. Knox started crying again, proper screaming now, red-faced and furious. Marco said something to Dante that Briar couldn't hear. Dante nodded, then looked up. His eyes found hers immediately. "Come down here," he said. It wasn't a request. Briar forced herself to move. Each step down the staircase felt like walking toward an execution. By the time she reached the bottom, Knox was wailing at full volume and her entire body was shaking. Dante dismissed the other men with a gesture. They disappeared into other parts of the house, leaving only Marco standing near the front door. "He'll be back," Briar whispered. "I know. With police, lawyers, court orders." Her voice was rising, panic clawing up her throat. "Wesley doesn't lose. He never loses. He'll find a way to Briar." Dante's voice cut through her spiral. "Look at me." She did. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that Dante Moretti, a man whose name made criminals nervous, could protect her from someone like Wesley, but Wesley had taught her not to trust anyone. "I don't know," she admitted. Dante nodded slowly. "Then let me prove it to you." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of lawyers, phone calls, and documents Briar didn't fully understand. Dante brought in a woman named Patricia Reeves, sharp-eyed, 50s, dressed in a power suit that probably cost more than Briar's car. She was a family attorney, Dante explained, one of the best in the state. Patricia sat across from Briar in Dante's private study and asked questions in a voice that was both professional and surprisingly gentle. "When did the abuse start?" Briar's throat tightened. "About 6 months after we got married." "Physical or emotional?" "Both." "Did you ever seek medical attention?" "Once. He broke my wrist." Briar looked down at her hands. "I told the hospital I fell down the stairs." Patricia made a note. "Did anyone witness the abuse?" "No. Wesley was careful. He only hit me where it wouldn't show, and he never did it when other people were around." "What about the police reports?" Briar's stomach churned. "I filed 4 times, but Wesley always convinced me to drop them." "How?" "He'd apologize, cry, promise it would never happen again." The words tasted bitter in Briar's mouth. "And then he'd remind me that I had no money, no job, nowhere to go. That if I left him, I'd lose everything." Patricia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "What about after Knox was born?" "It got worse." Briar's voice cracked. "Wesley started tracking every minute of my day. Installed cameras. Locked the bedroom windows from the outside. I couldn't leave the house without permission." "Did he ever threaten the baby?" Briar hesitated. This was the part she'd been afraid to say out loud, because once she said it, it became real. "He looked at Knox sometimes," she whispered, like he was a problem that needed to be solved. Patricia set down her pen. "Did he ever articulate what he meant by that?" "No, but I knew." Briar's hands shook. I could see it in his eyes. The same look he used to give me before things got bad. Silence filled the study. "Okay," Patricia said, finally. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're filing for an emergency restraining order. Second, we're documenting everything. Medical records, police reports, witness statements. Third, We're going to make sure Wesley Caro never gets within 100 feet of you or your son again. He'll fight it. Of course he will. Patricia's smile was cold. But he doesn't know what he's up against. She stood and gathered her papers. Get some rest, Briar. We have a lot of work ahead of us. After she left, Briar sat alone in the study, staring at the wall. Dante appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. You did well. I don't feel like I did well. You told the truth. That's all anyone can ask. He crossed the room and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter on the desk. He handed one to Briar. She took it automatically. I don't drink. You do now. Briar looked at the amber liquid, then took a small sip. It burned going down, but the warmth that followed was almost comforting. Wesley meant what he said, she told Dante, about coming back, about finding your mistakes. Let him look. You don't understand. Wesley is relentless. He doesn't stop until he gets what he wants. Neither do I. Dante's gray eyes locked onto hers. The difference is, I'm better at it. Briar wanted to believe him, but she'd spent too many years learning that hope was dangerous. What if he wins? She whispered. He won't. But what if... Briar. Dante set his glass down. Do you know why men like Wesley have power? She shook her head. Because women like you are too afraid to take it away from them. His voice was firm, but not unkind. You've been conditioned to believe that he's untouchable, that he's smarter, stronger, more connected than you, but that's a lie. It doesn't feel like a lie. That's because he spent years making you feel that way. Dante leaned forward. But here's the truth. Wesley Caro is a small man with a big ego and enough money to make people ignore his failures. Take away the money and the ego, and there's nothing left. How do you take away someone's money? For the first time, Dante smiled. It wasn't warm. Very carefully. 2 days later, Wesley filed for emergency custody. Patricia called Briar into Dante's study to explain the paperwork. He's claiming you're mentally unstable, a flight risk, and a danger to Knox. He's requesting immediate temporary custody pending a full psychological evaluation. Briar's blood went cold. Can he do that? He can try. Patricia spread the documents across the desk. But we're going to fight it. I've already filed a countermotion with evidence of abuse, and we're requesting that any custody hearing take place with a neutral third-party evaluator. When is the hearing? Next week. Briar's hands started shaking. Next week? That's not enough time to... It's plenty of time. Patricia's voice was firm. Trust me, Briar. I've handled worse cases than this. But Briar couldn't breathe. The walls of the study were closing in. Knox was asleep upstairs, safe and warm, and completely unaware that his father was trying to take him away. I need air, Briar gasped. She stumbled out of the study and through the house, her vision swimming. She burst through the back door into the gardens, sucking in cold air that didn't seem to reach her lungs. Her knees hit the gravel path. She was going to lose Knox. Wesley was going to stand in front of a judge and smile his charming smile and tell everyone that Briar was crazy, that she'd kidnapped their son, that he was just a concerned father trying to protect his child, and they'd believe him. They always believed him. Breathe. Briar looked up. Dante stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. I can't... Her voice broke. I can't do this. I can't go into a courtroom and fight him. I'll lose. I always lose. You've never had me before. That doesn't matter. Wesley has lawyers, judges, connections. Will you stop for 1 second and listen to me? Dante's voice cut through her panic like a whip. He crouched down in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. Wesley Caro is not invincible. He's a bully who's never been challenged, and the moment someone pushes back, he's going to fold. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Dante's jaw tightened. Because I've been destroying men like him for 20 years. Briar stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be because of your sister. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. After Isabella died, I spent 5 years hunting down everyone who'd helped Victor cover up what he did. Her friends who ignored the bruises, the police officers who refused to investigate, the judge who dismissed her restraining order. Briar's breath caught. By the time I was finished, Victor Castellano was serving life in prison, and everyone who'd enabled him had lost everything they cared about. Dante's eyes were cold, hard. I swore I'd never let that happen again, that I'd never stand by while another woman drowned because the system failed her. So you built this? Briar gestured toward the estate. A fortress for broken people. I built a place where women like you can survive long enough to fight back. Briar looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You ran from your husband in the middle of the night with nothing but a baby and a stolen car. Dante's voice was firm. You're stronger than you think. Before Briar could respond, Marco appeared on the back terrace. His expression was grim. Boss, we have a problem. Dante stood. What kind of problem? Wesley Caro just filed a police report claiming Briar stole $50,000 from his personal accounts before she left. The world tilted sideways. What? Briar gasped. That's not true. I didn't take anything. I didn't even have access to his accounts. I know. Marco looked at Dante. But the police are treating it as a felony theft charge. They're requesting an interview. Briar's stomach dropped. He's framing me. Yes, Dante said calmly. I could go to prison. No, you won't. How can you? Because I'm going to prove Wesley Caro fabricated the entire report. Dante's voice was ice. And when I'm finished, he's going to regret ever mentioning your name to the police. He turned to Marco. Get Patricia back here and call Vincent. Vincent? The forensic accountant. If Wesley wants to play games with financial records, we're going to show him exactly what that looks like. Marco nodded and disappeared inside. Briar tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Dante reached down and pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. This is it, isn't it? She whispered. The part where everything falls apart. No. Dante's grip on her arm was steady. This is the part where Wesley makes his first real mistake. Keek. That night, Briar couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Knox slept peacefully in his bassinet. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the house felt like Wesley's men breaking through the doors. At 2 a.m, she gave up and carried Knox downstairs. The house was dark except for dim security lights. She made her way to the kitchen, thinking she'd make tea, maybe find something to eat. Instead, she found Ava sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and red-rimmed eyes. Sorry, Briar said immediately. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Ava's voice was hoarse. She gestured to the coffee pot. Help yourself. Briar poured a cup and sat down carefully, adjusting Knox on her shoulder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Can't sleep either? Ava asked finally. No. Yeah, I have those nights sometimes. Ava stared into her coffee. The kind where everything feels too quiet. Briar studied her. Up close, she could see faint scars on Ava's wrists, old ones, long-healed. How long have you been here? Briar asked quietly. 3 years. And before that? Ava's laugh was bitter. Before that, I was married to a man who liked to use me as a punching bag. She lifted her coffee mug. Among other things. Briar's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm alive. That's more than some women get. Ava looked at Knox. How old? 4 months. He's lucky to have you. I don't feel lucky. You ran. Ava's voice was firm. That makes you luckier than most. They sat in silence for a while. The coffee was too hot, too bitter, but Briar drank it anyway. Does it get easier? She asked finally. Being here, feeling safe. Ava considered the question. Honestly, some days yes, some days no. But at least I don't wake up wondering if today's the day he kills me. What happened to your husband? He's dead. Ava's voice was flat. Car accident. Very tragic. The way she said it made Briar wonder if it was really an accident. Dante helped you, Briar said. It wasn't a question. Dante saved me. Ava set down her mug. I was 3 days away from killing myself when Marco found me in a motel outside the city. Dante brought me here, helped me disappear, made sure my ex couldn't find me. And then your ex died. Yeah. Ava met her eyes. Funny how that worked out. Briar's pulse quickened. Did Dante? I didn't ask. Ava stood and rinsed her mug in the sink. And neither should you. Some things are better left unknown. She left before Briar could respond. Briar sat alone in the dark kitchen, holding her sleeping son, and wondered exactly what kind of man she'd asked for help. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Patricia spent the weekend preparing Briar, running through questions the judge might ask, coaching her on how to stay calm under pressure. Wesley's lawyer is going to try to rattle you, Patricia warned. He'll bring up the theft charges, question your mental state, imply that you're an unfit mother. You need to stay composed. I don't know if I can. You can. Patricia's voice was firm. Because the alternative is losing your son. Monday night, Briar barely slept. She lay awake running through every possible scenario, every question, every way Wesley might destroy her credibility. By the time dawn broke, she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Mrs. Chen helped her get ready, lending her a conservative navy dress and helping with her hair. You look strong, Mrs. Chen said. That's what matters. Briar didn't feel strong. She felt terrified. Dante drove her to the courthouse himself. Patricia sat in the passenger seat, reviewing notes. Marco drove a second car behind them with additional security. Remember, Patricia said as they pulled into the parking garage, answer the questions directly. Don't volunteer information. And whatever you do, don't let them see you cry. What if I can't help it? Then excuse yourself and compose yourself in the bathroom. Patricia turned to look at her. Wesley's counting on you to fall apart. Don't give him the satisfaction. They walked into the courthouse together. Briar carried Knox in a baby carrier against her chest. Every step felt like walking toward her own execution. Wesley was already there. He stood outside the courtroom with his lawyer, a tall man in an expensive suit with silver hair and cold eyes. When Wesley saw Briar, his face transformed into an expression of concerned desperation. Briar! He moved toward her. Thank God you're okay. I've been so worried. Marco stepped between them. Don't. Wesley stopped, his jaw clenching. That's my wife. My son. You have no right to... Save it for the judge, Patricia said coldly. Wesley's lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, murmuring something too low to hear. Wesley's face went red, but he backed off. They entered the courtroom. The judge was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked at both parties with the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. This is an emergency custody hearing for Knox Caro, she said. Mr. Caro is requesting temporary custody based on allegations of parental unfitness. Mrs. Caro has filed a countermotion alleging domestic abuse. We're going to hear testimony from both parties and make a preliminary ruling. Wesley's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about the welfare of his son. Mrs. Caro disappeared without warning, taking the child with her and withdrawing $50,000 from their joint accounts. She's currently residing at an undisclosed location with known criminal associates. Objection, Patricia interrupted. That's an inflammatory characterization. Sustained. The judge looked at Wesley's lawyer. Stick to facts, counselor. Yes, Your Honor. He didn't look bothered. The facts are these. Mrs. Caro has a history of mental instability, as documented by her personal physician. She's made multiple unfounded accusations against my client, and she's currently preventing him from seeing his own son. Patricia stood. Your Honor, I have medical records showing extensive injuries consistent with domestic abuse. I have police reports filed by Mrs. Caro documenting violence, and I have witness statements from individuals who can corroborate her story. We'll hear testimony, the judge said. Mrs. Caro, you first. Briar's legs barely held her as she walked to the witness stand. Her hands shook as she was sworn in. Knox squirmed against her chest, and she had to adjust him before sitting down. Patricia approached. Mrs. Caro, can you describe your marriage to Wesley Caro? Briar's throat was so dry she could barely speak. It started well, but after we got married, things changed. How? He became controlling, jealous, angry. Briar forced herself to breathe. He tracked my phone, monitored my calls, told me I couldn't see my friends or family. Did the abuse become physical? Yes. Can you describe the first incident? Briar's hands clenched. 6 months after the wedding. He came home drunk, said I'd embarrassed him at a work event. He pushed me into a wall hard enough that I got a concussion. Did you seek medical attention? Yes. He drove me to the hospital himself, told the doctors I'd fallen. Wesley's lawyer stood. Objection, hearsay. She's describing her own experience, Patricia shot back. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. Patricia walked Briar through 2 years of abuse. The broken wrist, the bruises, the locked doors, the cameras. Every detail felt like ripping open old wounds. By the time Patricia finished, Briar was shaking so hard she could barely hold Knox. Then Wesley's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Caro, he said smoothly, you've painted quite a picture of my client, but isn't it true that you never pressed charges against him? I tried, 4 times, but you always dropped the reports. Because he convinced me to. Or because they weren't true. The lawyer's smile was cold. Isn't it possible that you fabricated these allegations to justify abandoning your marriage? No. And isn't it true that you're currently living with Dante Moretti, a man with known criminal associations? Objection! Patricia was on her feet. Relevance? I'm establishing a pattern of poor judgment, Wesley's lawyer said. The witness is not on trial, the judge said sharply. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. Briar could see it in the judge's eyes, the doubt creeping in. Wesley took the stand next. He was perfect, composed, heartbroken. He spoke about how much he loved Briar, how worried he'd been when she disappeared, how desperately he wanted his son back. She's not well, Your Honor, Wesley said, his voice cracking. I've tried to get her help, but she refuses. And now she's taken our son and disappeared with a known criminal. I'm terrified for Knox's safety. Briar wanted to scream, but Patricia had told her not to react, so she sat perfectly still and watched Wesley lie his way through testimony. When it was over, the judge looked between them both. I'm going to take this under advisement, she said. I'll issue a ruling within 48 hours. In the meantime, temporary custody remains with Mrs. Caro, but Mr. Caro is granted supervised visitation. Your Honor, Patricia started. That's my ruling, counselor. The judge's voice was firm. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Briar felt like she'd been hit in the chest. Supervised visitation. That meant Wesley would see Knox. That meant she'd have to hand her baby over to the man who'd tried to destroy her. Patricia was saying something, but Briar couldn't hear her over the roaring in her ears. She stood and walked out of the courtroom in a daze. Wesley caught her in the hallway. I told you, he hissed, his concerned husband mask dropping away. You can't win against me, Briar. You never could. Then he smiled. And Briar realized with perfect, terrible clarity that this was never going to end. Not with lawyers, not with judges, not with restraining orders or testimony or carefully documented evidence. Wesley was going to keep coming until one of them was destroyed, and she was so tired of running. She turned to Dante, who'd been standing silently behind her the entire time. I need you to do something for me, she said quietly. His gray eyes locked onto hers. What? I need you to make this stop. Briar, I don't care how you do it. Her voice was steady now, cold. I don't care what it costs. I just need Wesley to never touch my son again. Silence fell in the hallway. Patricia looked horrified. Marco's expression didn't change. And Dante? Dante just nodded. Okay, he said. That was the moment everything changed. The moment Briar stopped being a victim and became something much more dangerous. The drive back to the estate was silent. Briar sat in the back seat holding Knox, her body rigid, her mind replaying the moment she'd asked Dante to make it stop. The words had come out of her mouth before she'd fully processed what they meant. But now, sitting in the quiet car with rain starting to streak the windows, she understood exactly what she'd done. She'd asked a Mafia boss to destroy her husband, and he'd said yes. Patricia had left the courthouse separately, her face tight with professional disapproval. Marco drove without speaking, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Dante sat beside Briar, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. Nobody mentioned what had happened in the hallway, but it hung in the air between them like smoke. When they pulled through the gates of the estate, Briar finally spoke. What happens now? Dante turned to look at her. Now you go inside and take care of your son. That's not what I'm asking. I know what you're asking. His voice was quiet. And the answer is that you don't need to know the details. Yes, I do. No. Dante's gray eyes were hard. You asked me to handle it, so let me handle it. Briar's jaw clenched. I'm not a child. Then stop acting like one. The sharpness in his tone made her flinch. You made a choice back there. A dangerous choice. Now you need to live with it. I can live with it. Can you? Dante leaned forward slightly. Because once I start this, there's no taking it back. Wesley Caro will be destroyed. Completely. Permanently. And you'll have to carry that knowledge for the rest of your life. Briar looked down at Knox, who was sleeping peacefully against her chest. His tiny face was so innocent, so trusting. She thought about Wesley's smile in the courthouse hallway. She thought about the years of locked doors and broken bones and suffocating fear. She thought about what would happen if Wesley got custody. I can live with it, she repeated. Dante studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and opened the car door. Briar followed him inside, her legs unsteady. Mrs. Chen appeared immediately, taking Knox gently from her arms and murmuring something about feeding him. Briar let her go, too exhausted to protest. Dante walked toward his study. Briar followed. I didn't say you could come, he said without turning around. I don't care. He stopped at the door to the study and looked back at her. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or resignation. He pushed the door open and gestured for her to enter. The study was exactly as she remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Dante closed the door behind them and moved to the desk, where he poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Briar. Sit, he said. She sat. Dante remained standing, leaning against the desk, swirling the whiskey in his glass. Do you know what I do, Briar? Really do? You're an organized crime. That's a sanitized version. His voice was flat. I control shipping routes, import-export operations, construction contracts, real estate developments, all of it perfectly legal on paper. But underneath? He took a sip of whiskey. Underneath, I make sure the right people get paid, the wrong people disappear, and nobody asks too many questions. Briar's hands tightened around her glass. Why are you telling me this? Because if I'm going to help you, you need to understand what that means. Dante's eyes locked onto hers. It means Wesley Caro is going to wake up one morning and discover that his entire world has collapsed. His business partners will abandon him. His bank accounts will be frozen. His political connections will evaporate. And by the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Good, Briar whispered. You say that now. Dante set his glass down. But when it actually happens, when you see what real power looks like, when it's used without mercy, you might feel differently. I won't. Everyone says that. His voice was tired. Until they see the cost. Before Briar could respond, Marco appeared in the doorway. His expression was grim. We have a problem, he said. Dante straightened. What kind? The kind that requires your immediate attention. Marco's eyes flicked to Briar, then back to Dante. Private. Dante nodded. He looked at Briar. Go check on Knox. I'll find you when this is handled. Briar wanted to argue, but the look on Marco's face made her stomach turn. She left. She found Knox in the nursery with Mrs. Chen, who was changing his diaper with practiced efficiency. The room was warm and quiet, decorated in soft blues and whites that made it feel like a sanctuary. He ate well, Mrs. Chen said without looking up. And he's been calm. That's good. Briar sank into the rocking chair by the window. Her entire body ached with exhaustion. Thank you. You did the right thing today. Briar looked up sharply. You don't know what I did. I know enough. Mrs. Chen finished with the diaper and lifted Knox into her arms. She carried him to Briar and placed him gently in her lap. You protected your son. That's all any mother can do. Tears burned Briar's eyes. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. Mrs. Chen's hand rested briefly on Briar's shoulder. But you're still here. That's what matters. She left quietly. Briar held Knox and rocked slowly, listening to the rain against the windows. She tried not to think about what Dante and Marco were discussing downstairs. Tried not to imagine what kind of problem required immediate private attention. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, footsteps approached down the hallway. Briar looked up as Dante entered the nursery, his face drawn. What happened? She asked immediately. Dante closed the door behind him. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Wesley filed an emergency motion accusing me of kidnapping. He claims I'm holding you here against your will. Briar's stomach dropped. That's insane. It's strategic. Dante crossed to the window, staring out at the dark gardens. He's trying to force a welfare check. If the police show up here and you're present, it undermines his case. But if you're not, he wins. He creates doubt. Dante turned to face her. Enough doubt that a judge might reconsider the custody arrangement. So what do we do? You stay here. Answer their questions truthfully. Make it clear you're here by choice. His jaw tightened. And I stay away from you while they investigate. What? No, that's necessary. Dante's voice was firm. If Wesley's lawyer can establish any kind of improper relationship between us, it damages your credibility. So for the next week, maybe 2, we need to maintain complete distance. Briar stared at him. You're serious? Completely. But you're the only reason I'm safe right now. And that safety will disappear if Wesley convinces a judge I'm manipulating you. Dante moved toward the door. Patricia will continue representing you. Marco will handle security, but I need to be invisible until this blows over. Dante. This isn't a discussion, Briar. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. Then he was gone. Briar sat alone in the nursery, holding Knox, and felt the first real flicker of doubt. The police arrived 2 days later. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, both wearing expressions of professional skepticism. They showed Briar their badges and asked if they could speak with her privately. Patricia was there within 20 minutes. They sat in the formal living room, Briar on one couch with Patricia beside her, the detectives across from them. Knox slept in his carrier at Briar's feet. Mrs. Caro, the male detective began. His name was Morrison, she remembered. Salt and pepper hair, tired eyes. We're here following up on a report filed by your husband. He claims you're being held here against your will. That's not true, Briar said immediately. Then you're free to leave whenever you want? Yes? And Mr. Moretti hasn't threatened you or coerced you in any way? No. He's been... Briar stopped herself. She could feel Patricia's warning glance. He's provided shelter. Nothing more. The female detective, younger, sharper, leaned forward. Mrs. Caro, we need to be very clear about something. Dante Moretti is a person of interest in multiple ongoing investigations. If he's involved in your custody dispute, that could complicate things significantly. That could. He's not involved, Patricia interjected. My client is staying at this location temporarily for her own safety. Mr. Moretti is merely the property owner. That's convenient, Morrison said dryly. It's the truth, Briar said. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs to hide it. Wesley is dangerous. He's abusive. I needed somewhere he couldn't find me, and Mr. Moretti offered this place. Out of the goodness of his heart. The female detective's skepticism was obvious. Out of experience. Briar's voice hardened. He understands what it's like to lose someone to domestic violence. So yes, he helped me. Is that illegal? Morrison and his partner exchanged glances. Mrs. Caro, Morrison said carefully, if your husband is truly dangerous, there are resources, shelters, police protection, legal remedies. I tried those. Briar's throat tightened. 4 times, and every time Wesley made it go away. So you turned to a known criminal instead? I turned to someone who could actually protect me. The words came out sharper than she intended, which is more than the police ever did. Patricia touched her arm gently. A warning. Morrison stood. We'll need to speak with Mr. Moretti as well. He's not available, Patricia said smoothly. Make him available. My client's testimony is sufficient. Mr. Moretti's presence is required, Morrison interrupted. Either he speaks with us voluntarily or we get a warrant. Patricia's expression didn't change, but Briar could feel the tension radiating from her. I'll make arrangements, Patricia said finally. The detectives left. The moment they were gone, Patricia turned to Briar. That went about as well as expected. They think I'm lying. They think you're involved with Dante romantically and using the abuse allegations as cover. Patricia's voice was clinical. It's exactly what Wesley's lawyer is going to argue. Briar's stomach churned. I'm not involved with Dante. I know that, but perception matters more than truth in cases like this. Patricia gathered her papers. You need to be very careful about how much contact you have with him until this is resolved. He already told me that. Good. Patricia paused at the door. Briar, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Okay. Did you ask Dante to do something to Wesley? Something outside legal channels? Briar's pulse spiked. Why are you asking? Because if you did, and it comes out during the investigation, you'll lose custody, permanently. Patricia's eyes were hard. So I'm asking again, did you? Briar thought about the hallway outside the courtroom, the moment she'd asked Dante to make it stop, the way he'd nodded without hesitation. No, she lied. Patricia studied her for a long moment, then she nodded. Good, keep it that way. She left. Briar sat alone in the living room holding Knox and felt the walls closing in. 3 days passed. Dante remained invisible, as promised. Briar caught glimpses of him occasionally, a shadow moving through the hallway late at night, a figure standing in the gardens at dawn. But they didn't speak. Marco handled all communication. He was efficient, professional, and completely unhelpful when Briar asked questions about what was happening with Wesley. Boss says not to worry about it, Marco repeated for the third time in as many days. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Briar wanted to scream. Instead, she focused on Knox, feeding him, changing him, rocking him to sleep when he cried. The routine kept her sane when everything else felt like it was spiraling out of control. On the fourth day, Patricia called with news. The judge is moving up the custody hearing, she said without preamble. We're scheduled for Monday morning. That's 3 days from now. I know. Why is she moving it up? Patricia hesitated. Wesley's lawyer filed a motion claiming new evidence has come to light regarding your mental state. The judge wants to hear it immediately. What evidence? I don't know yet. They're required to disclose it to us 24 hours before the hearing. Patricia's voice was tight. But whatever it is, it's significant enough that the judge took it seriously. Briar's hands went cold. He's lying. Whatever he says, it's a lie. I believe you, but we need to be prepared for anything. After Patricia hung up, Briar sat on the bed in her room, staring at nothing. Wesley was escalating, and she had no idea what he was planning. That night, she couldn't stand it anymore. She left Knox with Mrs. Chen and went looking for Dante. She found him in his study, sitting in the dark with a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk. I told you to stay away, he said, without looking up. I don't care. Briar closed the door behind her. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Wesley's planning something. Patricia said he has new evidence. I know. You know? Briar's voice rose. How do you know? Dante finally looked at her. In the dim light from the window, his face looked older, harder. Because I've been monitoring his communications. And because I know how men like Wesley think. Then tell me what he's planning. No. Dante, our source. You asked me to handle this. His voice was cold. So let me handle it. I can't just sit here and wait while he destroys me. That's exactly what you're going to do. Dante stood, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. Because if you panic now, if you do something stupid, you'll give Wesley exactly what he needs to win. Briar's hands clenched into fists. I'm not panicking. Yes, you are. His eyes locked onto hers. You're terrified, and that terror is going to make you sloppy. I'm not. You came down here in the middle of the night to find me, even though I explicitly told you to stay away. Dante's voice was sharp. That's sloppy. If anyone saw you, if the detectives are still watching this house, you just handed Wesley ammunition. Briar's breath caught. She hadn't thought about that. Get out of my study, Dante said quietly. Go back to your room. Take care of your son. And trust that I know what I'm doing. Briar wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but the look in Dante's eyes stopped her. She left. The disclosure came Saturday morning. Patricia arrived at the estate with a manila envelope, her expression grim. You need to see this, she said. They sat in the formal living room. Patricia opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. Wesley's lawyer is claiming you have a history of psychiatric treatment, Patricia began, including a diagnosis of postpartum psychosis and multiple suicide attempts. Briar's vision blurred. That's not true. I know. Patricia held up a hand. But Wesley has medical records to support it. Records from a Dr. Richard Brennan, who allegedly treated you for 6 months after Knox was born. I never saw a Dr. Brennan. I don't even know who that is. Patricia's jaw tightened. The records are fake. They have to be, but they're very good fakes. Professional, complete with session notes and prescription histories. How is that possible? Because Wesley has money and connections and apparently zero ethical boundaries. Patricia set the papers down. We can challenge the records, demand verification, but that takes time, and the hearing is Monday. Briar's hands started shaking. So what do? We fight it. Hard. Patricia's voice was firm. I'll file a motion to exclude the evidence on the grounds that it's fraudulent. I'll subpoena Dr. Brennan himself, if he even exists, and force Wesley's lawyer to prove the records are legitimate. Will that work? I don't know. Patricia's honesty was brutal. But it's all we have. After Patricia left, Briar sat alone, staring at the forged medical records. Wesley had created an entire false history of mental illness, complete with doctors and diagnoses and prescriptions she'd never taken. And the worst part was that people would believe it, because Wesley was charming, credible, respectable, and she was just his unstable wife. Briar stood and walked through the house in a daze. She ended up in the gardens, rain soaking through her clothes, staring at nothing. She heard footsteps behind her. You need to come inside, Dante said. He's going to win. Briar's voice was hollow. Wesley's going to take Knox, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. That's not true. Yes, it is. She turned to face him. He's manufactured evidence, fake medical records. What am I supposed to fight that with? The truth? The truth doesn't matter when he can buy whatever version of reality he wants. Dante stepped closer. Do you trust me? I don't know anymore. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe. Or anger. Then let me prove it to you. How? By showing you what I've been working on. Dante gestured toward the house. Come inside. There's something you need to see. Briar followed him back to the study. Marco was waiting there, along with a man she'd never seen before. Thin, late 40s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a rumpled suit. This is Vincent, Dante said. Forensic accountant. Tell her what you found. Vincent opened a laptop and turned it toward Briar. The screen was filled with spreadsheets and financial documents. Wesley Caro has been embezzling from his own company for the last 3 years, Vincent said without preamble. Approximately $2 million funneled through offshore accounts. He's also been cooking the books to hide losses from investors. Briar stared at the screen. How do you know this? Because I spent the last week tracing every transaction through his business accounts. Vincent adjusted his glasses. And because your husband is sloppy when he thinks nobody's watching. Can you prove it? Briar asked. Already did. Vincent pulled up another document. I've compiled a report with complete documentation, account numbers, transfer dates, shell company registrations, everything a federal prosecutor would need to build a case. Briar looked at Dante. You did this. I told you I'd handle it. But this is... She didn't know how to finish. This will destroy him. That was the point, Dante said calmly. Marco spoke up. Vincent's report goes to the FBI on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Wesley Caro will be facing federal charges. By Tuesday, his assets will be frozen and his business will be in receivership. Briar couldn't breathe. Monday morning, the same day as the custody hearing? Not coincidentally, Dante said. She looked between the three men. You're going to destroy Wesley's entire life right before he walks into court. Yes? And you think that will stop him from getting custody? I think a man facing federal prison time will have more immediate concerns than a custody battle, Dante said. I also think the judge will take a very dim view of his credibility once the charges become public. Briar sank into a chair. It was brilliant, ruthless, exactly what she'd asked for. So why did it feel like she'd just made a deal with something dark and irreversible? There's one problem, Vincent said quietly. Dante's expression hardened. What problem? The records I found, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, they include transfers to an account registered under your name. Silence filled the study. What? Briar whispered. Vincent pulled up another document. $50,000, transferred from Wesley's personal account to an account at First National Bank registered to Briarvale Caro. Same $50,000 he reported stolen. Briar's stomach dropped. I never opened that account. I know, Vincent said. But Wesley did, using your social security number and forged identification. Then he transferred the money himself and reported it stolen. He framed me, Briar breathed. Yes. Vincent's voice was grim. And he did it well. The account has your signature on the paperwork, your personal information. If this goes to trial, it'll be very difficult to prove you weren't involved. Briar looked at Dante. He planned this from the beginning. The theft report, the fake medical records, all of it. Wesley's been building a case against you for months, Dante said quietly, making sure that if you ever left, he'd have enough ammunition to destroy your credibility and get custody. So what do? We use the embezzlement evidence to shift focus away from you. Dante's jaw was tight. When Wesley's arrested on Monday, the theft charge becomes irrelevant. The FBI will investigate and discover he opened the account himself. And if they don't? Dante didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. If the FBI believed Wesley's story, Briar would go to prison. And Wesley would get Knox. Sunday night, Briar didn't sleep at all. She lay in bed holding Knox, listening to the rain against the windows, trying to process everything that was about to happen. Tomorrow, Dante would destroy Wesley's life. Tomorrow, the FBI would arrest him on federal charges. Tomorrow, she'd walk into court and find out if any of it had been enough. Around 3 a.m, there was a soft knock on her door. Come in, she called quietly. Dante entered. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body. Can't sleep either? Briar asked. No. He crossed to the window and stared out at the dark gardens. I need to tell you something. What? If this goes wrong tomorrow, if Wesley somehow walks away from the federal charges, if the judge doesn't believe the evidence, you need to take Knox and run. Briar's breath caught. What are you talking about? I have a contact in Montreal, Canadian citizenship, new identities. Dante's voice was flat. Marco will drive you to the border. You'll disappear, completely. That's illegal. So is what I'm about to do to Wesley. Dante turned to face her. I'm giving you an escape route, just in case. Why? Because I promised you'd be safe. His gray eyes were hard. And I keep my promises. Briar stared at him. You'd help me run? Even if it meant admitting defeat? There's no defeat in surviving. Dante moved toward the door. Get some rest. We have a long day ahead of us. He left before she could respond. Briar held Knox tighter and tried not to think about what running would mean. Leaving everything behind. New names, new lives. Never seeing anyone she'd ever known again. She closed her eyes and prayed it wouldn't come to that. But deep down, she knew the truth. Wesley had been planning this for months. And Dante's plan, brilliant as it was, relied on everything going perfectly. In Briar's experience, nothing ever went perfectly. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Briar dressed carefully in the navy suit Patricia had brought her. Mrs. Chen helped with her hair, pulling it back into a neat bun that made her look older, more composed. Knox was dressed in a tiny blue outfit that made him look impossibly small. Patricia arrived at 7, her expression professionally neutral. Ready? No? Briar admitted. Good. That means you understand what's at stake. Patricia picked up her briefcase. Let's go. The drive to the courthouse was silent, except for Knox's occasional fussing. Marco drove with 2 security vehicles flanking them. Dante remained at the estate, maintaining distance as promised. They arrived 15 minutes early. Wesley was already there. He stood outside the courtroom with his lawyer, looking perfect as always. Expensive suit, confident posture, concerned expression. When he saw Briar, he moved toward her immediately. Briar, please, he said, his voice breaking. Can we just talk? For Knox's sake? Marco stepped between them. No. Wesley's mask slipped for just a second, fury flashing across his face before he smoothed it away. I'm trying to do what's best for our son. Then leave him alone, Briar said quietly. You're poisoning him against me. He's 4 months old, Wesley. He doesn't even know who you are. Wesley's jaw clenched. That's going to change. Today. They entered the courtroom. The judge looked even more tired than she had at the last hearing. She reviewed her notes, then looked up. Before we begin, she said, I need to address something that came to my attention this morning. Briar's heart stopped. Mr. Caro, the judge continued, are you aware that federal agents executed search warrants at your business and residence early this morning? Wesley went pale. What? I received notification from the U.S. Attorney's Office that you're under investigation for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The judge's voice was cold. Is that correct? Wesley's lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, my client was not informed of any investigation. That's how investigations work, Counselor. The judge looked at Wesley. Mr. Caro, do you have anything to say? Wesley's face had gone from pale to red. His hands gripped the table in front of him so hard his knuckles went white. This is a setup, he hissed. That man, Moretti, he did this. He fabricated evidence to... That man isn't in this courtroom, the judge interrupted. And frankly, your criminal charges are not my concern, but they do impact my decision regarding custody. You can't let this influence... I can and I will, the judge's voice was sharp. You presented evidence claiming Mrs. Caro is mentally unstable and a danger to your son. But given your current legal situation, I have serious concerns about your credibility. Wesley's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge held up a hand. I'm granting Mrs. Caro temporary full custody pending the resolution of your criminal case, she said. Visitation is suspended until further notice. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Briar couldn't breathe. She'd won. Wesley was staring at her across the courtroom, his face twisted with hatred so pure it made her skin crawl. You did this, he said, his voice shaking. You and that criminal. I protected my son, Briar said quietly. You destroyed me. No. Briar stood, holding Knox against her chest. You destroyed yourself. Then she walked out of the courtroom with Patricia and Marco flanking her, leaving Wesley and his shattered empire behind. They made it to the parking garage before Briar's legs gave out. She sagged against the car, gasping, tears streaming down her face. It's over, Patricia said gently. You won. But Briar couldn't stop shaking, because she knew it wasn't over. Not really. Wesley had lost everything in a single morning. His business, his reputation, his freedom. And men like Wesley didn't accept loss quietly. They got revenge. Marco's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then went very still. What? Briar asked immediately. Marco lowered the phone, his expression grim. Wesley just posted bail. He's already out. Briar's stomach dropped. How is that possible? Emergency hearing. His lawyer argued he wasn't a flight risk. Marco's jaw tightened. He walked out of custody 20 minutes ago. Where is he now? Unknown. Patricia's face had gone pale. We need to get you back to the estate, now. They climbed into the car. Marco drove fast, running red lights, his hand hovering near his jacket, where Briar knew he kept a gun. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Did you really think I'd let you take my son? Wesley's voice was cold, controlled. Did you really think destroying my life would make you safe? Briar's hand started shaking. Wesley, I know where you are, Briar. I know who's protecting you, and I know exactly how to make this stop. If you come near Knox, I don't need to come near Knox. Wesley's laugh was hollow. I just need to take away the one thing keeping you safe. The line went dead. Briar looked at Marco. Call Dante. Now. Marco was already dialing. It rang once, twice. No answer. Briar's chest tightened. They pulled through the gates of the estate and screeched to a stop in front of the house. The front door was open. Marco had his gun out before the car fully stopped. Stay here. No! But Marco was already moving, disappearing into the house with 2 other security guards following. Patricia grabbed Briar's arm. Wait for the all clear. Briar couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except sit in the car holding Knox while her entire world collapsed around her. Marco reappeared in the doorway. His face was ashen. He's gone, Marco said hoarsely. Who's gone? Dante. Marco's voice cracked. Wesley's people took him. And that was when Briar realized the horrible, terrifying truth. Wesley hadn't come for Knox. He'd come for the one person who could actually stop him. And now Dante Moretti, the man who'd saved her life, was gone, taken by a monster who had nothing left to lose. The world tilted sideways. Briar stood in the entrance hall holding Knox, her legs barely supporting her weight, while Marco paced like a caged animal and barked orders into his phone. Security personnel flooded the house. Men in dark suits with weapons drawn, checking rooms, securing exits, their movement sharp and military precise. But none of it mattered, because Dante was gone. How did they get past the gates? Marco was shouting at someone. How did they get into the house without triggering a single alarm? A younger guard, pale, sweating, stepped forward. They came in through the service entrance, had the security codes, knew exactly where the cameras were. Who gave them the codes? The guard's silence was answer enough. Someone inside the house had betrayed them. Briar's chest constricted. She couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Her brain kept replaying Wesley's words on the phone. I just need to take away the one thing keeping you safe. We need to find him, Briar said. Her voice came out hollow, distant. Marco turned to her. We will. When? I don't know. That's not good enough! The words exploded out of her. Knox startled in her arms, beginning to cry. Briar rocked him automatically, her body moving on instinct while her mind spiraled. Wesley has him. Wesley, who just lost everything, who has nothing left to lose. What do you think he's going to do to Dante? Marco's jaw clenched. I'm doing everything I can. It's not enough. Then what do you want me to do? Marco's voice cracked. Dante's been taken by a man with resources, connections, and enough rage to burn down the entire city. I can't just... His phone buzzed. He answered immediately. Talk to me. Briar watched his face go from tense to ashen. When? Marco asked. Where? He listened, then ended the call. What? Briar demanded. Marco's hands were shaking. They found one of our security vehicles abandoned 2 miles from here. Driver's throat was slit, 2 guards missing. The room spun. Patricia appeared from somewhere, her face drawn. We need to call the police. No police, Marco said immediately. Are you insane? This is kidnapping. Federal. The moment cops get involved, Wesley kills Dante. Marco's voice was flat. That's how this works. We handle it ourselves. With what? Patricia gestured around the house. Your boss is gone. Your security is compromised. What exactly is your plan? Marco didn't answer, because he didn't have one. Briar's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. She answered. Briar. Wesley's voice was calm, too calm. I assume you've heard by now. If you hurt him, you'll what? Wesley laughed. You have no leverage here, no power, no options. You destroyed my life, and now I'm going to show you what that feels like. This isn't about me. This is about you being a controlling, abusive... This is about you forgetting who you're dealing with. Wesley's voice went cold. I built an empire from nothing. You think some mafia boss with delusions of grandeur could actually destroy me? I'm going to rebuild everything, but first I'm going to make sure you understand the consequences of crossing me. Let Dante go. He's not part of this. He became part of it the moment he decided to protect you. Wesley paused. I'm going to send you an address. You have 2 hours to get there. Come alone. No security. No lawyers. No police. Wesley, if I see anyone except you, Dante Moretti dies. Do you understand? Briar's vision blurred. Yes. Good. And Briar? Bring our son. The line went dead. A text message appeared. An address in an industrial district on the south side of the city. Marco grabbed the phone from her hand. You're not going. Yes, I am. It's a trap. I know. Briar's voice was steady now, cold. But he has Dante. And if I don't go, Wesley will kill him. So we let him, Marco said brutally. We keep you and Knox safe, and we deal with the consequences. Briar stared at him. You'd let Dante die? I'd let 1,000 people die before I let Wesley get his hands on you and that baby. Marco's expression was stone. That's what Dante would want. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Marco's voice cracked. Because he told me. 3 days ago. He said if it ever came down to choosing between saving him or protecting you, I choose you. Every time. Tears burned Briar's eyes. I can't let Wesley kill him. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Briar handed Knox to Mrs. Chen, who'd appeared silently in the doorway. Then she turned to Marco. Give me your gun. What? Your gun. Give it to me. Marco's eyes widened. Absolutely not. You said, I don't have a choice. But I do. I can walk into that warehouse defenseless and hope Wesley shows mercy, or I can walk in armed and ready to fight. Briar's hands were steady now. Give me the gun, Marco. You don't know how to shoot. Then teach me. Fast. Patricia stepped forward. This is insane. You can't seriously be considering... I'm not considering anything. Briar's voice was ice. I'm going to that address. I'm getting Dante back. And if Wesley tries to take Knox, I'm putting a bullet in him. Silence filled the entrance hall. Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a Glock 19. Safety's here, he said, showing her. Point and squeeze. Don't pull. Don't jerk. Just squeeze steady. Briar took the weapon. It was heavier than she expected. You get 1 magazine, Marco continued. 15 rounds. Make them count. I will. And you don't go alone. Marco's jaw was set. I don't care what Wesley said. You walk in there without backup, you're dead. Then stay outside, out of sight. If I need you, I'll fire a shot, Marco finished. We'll come running. Patricia looked between them. This is illegal, dangerous, completely... I don't care. Briar tucked the gun into the waistband of her skirt, hidden beneath her jacket. Keep Knox here, keep him safe. If I don't come back, you're coming back, Marco said firmly. Briar wanted to believe him, but she'd learned a long time ago that wanting something didn't make it true. She kissed Knox one more time, breathing in his baby smell, memorizing the weight of him in her arms. Then she walked out the door with Marco beside her and Patricia's protests fading behind them. Tate. The industrial district was a graveyard of abandoned factories and rusted warehouses. Marco drove in tense silence, 2 additional vehicles following at a distance. The address Wesley had sent led to a massive concrete building with broken windows and weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. Marco pulled over 3 blocks away and killed the engine. Last chance to reconsider, he said. No. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small earpiece. Put this in. Stay connected. If anything goes wrong, you'll hear it. Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Dante's going to kill me for letting you do this. Only if he survives long enough. Briar checked the gun one more time, making sure the safety was off. How do I look? Terrified. Good. That's what Wesley expects. She opened the car door. Stay close, but not too close. Briar. She looked back. Don't hesitate, Marco said quietly. If you get a clear shot at Wesley, take it. Don't think, don't negotiate, just pull the trigger. Briar nodded. Then she stepped out of the car and started walking. The warehouse loomed ahead, its shadow stretching across cracked pavement. Broken glass crunched under her feet. The air smelled like rust and decay. The front entrance was a massive sliding door, half open. Briar stepped through. The interior was cavernous. High ceilings supported by metal beams, concrete floors stained with oil and years of neglect. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, creating shafts of dusty light that only made the shadows deeper. Hello? Her voice echoed. No response. She moved deeper into the warehouse, her hand hovering near the gun at her waist. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out before the trap closed. But Dante was here somewhere, and she wasn't leaving without him. Briar! She spun around. Wesley stood 30 feet away, perfectly illuminated by a shaft of sunlight. He changed out of his court clothes into dark jeans and a casual shirt. He looked almost normal, almost human, except for his eyes. There was nothing human in his eyes anymore. You came, he said. You knew I would. Of course, Wesley smiled. Because despite everything, you're still the same scared little girl I married. The one who does what she's told. Briar's jaw clenched. Where's Dante? Nearby. Wesley gestured vaguely toward the back of the warehouse. Alive. For now. I want to see him. You will, after we talk. We have nothing to talk about. Don't we? Wesley took a step closer. You destroyed my business, my reputation, my entire life, and you think you can just walk away from that? You destroyed your own life. Briar forced herself to stay still. I just stopped letting you destroy mine. Wesley's smile vanished. You stole my son. I protected our son from you. From me? His voice rose. I gave you everything. A house, money, security. I made you into someone. And this is how you repay me? You beat me, Wesley. You locked me up. You made me afraid to breathe without your permission. I disciplined you when you needed it. Wesley was moving closer now, his movements predatory. You were always so weak, so needy. Someone had to keep you in line. Briar's hand moved toward the gun. Wesley noticed. His eyes narrowed. Did Marco give you that? He asked. Does he really think a weapon makes you dangerous? Stay back. Or what? You'll shoot me? Wesley laughed. You don't have it in you, Briar. You never did. That's why you needed someone like Moretti to fight your battles. I said stay back. But Wesley kept coming. Where's our son? He asked. You were supposed to bring Knox. He's safe. From me? Wesley's face twisted with rage. I'm his father. You're a monster. No. Wesley was only 10 feet away now. I'm the man who gave you everything and got betrayal in return. But that ends today. He lunged. Briar pulled the gun and fired. The shot went wide, slamming into the concrete wall behind Wesley. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Wesley froze, his eyes wide. Then he smiled. You missed. Next one won't, Briar said. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the weapon steady. Yes, it will. Wesley's voice was calm. Because you're not a killer, Briar. You're a victim. That's all you'll ever be. Movement behind him. 2 men emerged from the shadows, private security, the same ones from the courthouse. They had guns drawn, pointed at Briar. Put it down, Wesley said, or they'll shoot you. Briar's finger tightened on the trigger. I'll shoot you first. No, you won't. Wesley took another step forward. Because if you do, they'll kill you. And then who protects Knox? He was right. She lowered the gun. Wesley crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and ripped the weapon from her hand. Then his fist connected with her face. Briar hit the concrete floor hard, stars exploding across her vision. Blood filled her mouth. Did you really think you could beat me? Wesley's voice was distant, distorted. Did you really think some criminal could save you from me? He kicked her in the ribs. Air exploded from her lungs. She curled into a ball, gasping, tasting blood. You're nothing, Wesley hissed. You've always been nothing, and after today everyone will know it. Through the ringing in her ears, Briar heard the earpiece crackle. Marco's voice. I'm coming in. Wesley grabbed her hair and yanked her head back. Look at me. She did. You're going to tell the police that Dante Moretti kidnapped you, Wesley said, that he held you hostage, threatened Knox, and forced you to testify against me. You're going to recant everything. No. Yes. Wesley's grip tightened. Because if you don't, I'm going to kill Moretti. Then I'm going to kill Marco. Then everyone in that house who helped you, and then I'm going to take Knox and disappear where you'll never find him. Briar's vision blurred with tears and blood. You can't. I can do whatever I want. Wesley released her hair and stood. I still have money, connections, ways to disappear that you can't even imagine. So you're going to do exactly what I tell you, starting now. He nodded to one of his guards. The man disappeared into the shadows and returned dragging someone. Dante. Briar's breath stopped. He was barely conscious, his face bruised and bleeding, hands zip-tied behind his back. The guard dumped him on the concrete floor like garbage. Dante, Briar gasped. His eyes flickered open, gray and unfocused. Briar, his voice was hoarse. Run! How touching, Wesley said. He pulled a gun from his waistband, Briar's gun, and pressed it against Dante's head. Last chance, Briar. Agree to recant or I blow his brains across this floor. Briar's entire body was shaking. Don't! Then say it. Say you'll do what I want. She looked at Dante. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye. His breathing was labored, but his eyes, those cold gray eyes, were completely clear now, and he shook his head. Just run once. No, Briar whispered. Wesley's face went red. What? No. Louder now. I won't recant. I won't lie for you. I won't let you control me ever again. Then he dies. Wesley's finger moved to the trigger. So do I, Briar said. You shoot him, your guards shoot me, and then what? You have nobody to recant. No leverage, just 2 bodies and a kidnapping charge. Wesley hesitated. You need me alive, Briar continued. Her voice was steadying. You need me broken and obedient and willing to do whatever you say. But I'm done being that person. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Briar pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain screaming through her ribs. I choose to fight, even if it kills me. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Wesley's face. Then the warehouse exploded with gunfire. Marco and his team burst through 3 different entrances simultaneously, weapons drawn. Wesley's guards returned fire, muzzle flashes lighting up the dim space. Wesley grabbed Briar, using her as a shield. Call them off, he screamed, pressing the gun against her temple. Briar's heart hammered. She could feel the cold metal digging into her skin. Marco appeared from behind a concrete pillar, his weapon trained on Wesley. Let her go. I'll kill her. Then you die 2 seconds later. Marco's voice was ice. Your choice. Wesley's hand was shaking. Sweat dripped down his face. This is over, Wesley, Briar said quietly. You lost. No. His voice cracked. I don't lose. I never lose. You already have. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Wesley's grip loosened. Just slightly. Just enough. Briar drove her elbow back into his stomach with every ounce of strength she had left. Wesley gasped, staggering. The gun swung away from her head. Marco fired. The shot hit Wesley in the shoulder, spinning him around. The gun flew from his hand, skittering across the concrete. Wesley collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. You shot me, he gasped. You actually shot me. Yeah. Marco kept his weapon trained on Wesley's head. And if you move, I'll do it again. Sirens wailed in the distance. Patricia had called the police after all. Briar stumbled toward Dante. He was still on the floor, barely conscious. She dropped to her knees beside him. Hey, she whispered. Stay with me. His eyes opened. Knox? Safe. He's safe. Dante's lips curved into something almost like a smile. Good. Then his eyes closed. Dante! Briar's hands pressed against his chest, checking for wounds. There were too many. Cuts, bruises, blood everywhere. Don't you dare die on me. Not planning on it, he murmured. Marco was beside them now, cutting through Dante's zip ties with a knife. Ambulance is 2 minutes out. Briar cradled Dante's head in her lap. His breathing was shallow but steady. Behind them, police flooded the warehouse. Officers swarmed Wesley, forcing him face down on the concrete, reading him his rights. He was still screaming, still protesting his innocence, but nobody was listening anymore. Patricia appeared, her face pale. Briar, are you? I'm fine. She wasn't. Her ribs were probably cracked. Her face was swelling. Every breath hurt. Is Knox, still at the estate with Mrs. Chen. Safe. Patricia knelt beside her. It's over, Briar. Wesley's going to prison for a very long time. Briar looked down at Dante. Blood matted his hair. His face was a mess of bruises. But he was alive. It's over, she repeated. But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't quite true. Because Wesley was being loaded into a police car, and he was staring at her through the window with eyes full of hatred so pure it made her skin crawl. And she realized with cold certainty that as long as Wesley Caro was breathing, this would never truly be over. The hospital was chaos. Paramedics rushed Dante into surgery while Briar sat in the emergency room getting x-rays of her ribs. 2 cracked. Nothing life-threatening. Wesley was in a different wing under police guard, being treated for the gunshot wound to his shoulder. Marco paced the waiting room like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear. coordinating security and damage control, and 1,000 other things Briar couldn't process. Patricia sat beside her, quietly handling the legal fallout. "The district attorney wants a statement," Patricia said, "about what happened in the warehouse. Wesley tried to kill me, kill Dante, take Knox." Briar's voice was flat. "That's the statement. They'll need more detail than that. Then they can wait." Briar stared at the doors to the surgical wing. "How long has he been in there?" 3 hours. "That's too long. Head trauma takes time." Patricia's voice was gentle. "The doctors said he'll be okay." "They don't know that." "No, but they're doing everything they can." Briar closed her eyes. She was so tired she could barely think. Every part of her body hurt, but she couldn't rest, couldn't relax, because Wesley was still alive, still breathing, still dangerous. A doctor finally emerged from the surgical wing at hour 4, young, exhausted, wearing scrubs stained with blood that made Briar's stomach turn. "Family of Dante Moretti?" Marco was there immediately. "How is he?" "Stable. The surgery went well. We repaired internal bleeding, set a fractured orbital bone, and stitched up various lacerations." The doctor pulled off his surgical cap. "He's lucky. Another hour without treatment and the internal bleeding would have killed him." Briar's legs nearly gave out. Marco caught her arm. "Can we see him?" Marco asked. "He's in recovery. Probably won't wake up for a few more hours." The doctor hesitated. "I should warn you, he's going to look worse before he looks better. The facial trauma alone." "I don't care what he looks like," Briar interrupted. "I just need to see him." The doctor nodded. "Room 412." They found Dante in a private room, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically. His face was so swollen and bruised that he was barely recognizable. Bandages covered half his head, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Briar sank into the chair beside the bed. She reached out and took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV line. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "You know that? Getting kidnapped, almost dying, scaring the hell out of me." Dante didn't respond. Briar squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. Because Her voice broke. "Because Knox needs you, and I need you. So don't you dare give up." Marco stood in the doorway, watching silently. "I'll be outside," he said finally, "if you need anything." "Marco." He looked back. "Thank you," Briar said. "For everything." Marco's expression softened slightly. "Dante's family, that makes you family too." Then he left. Briar sat alone with Dante, listening to the machine's beep and the ventilator hiss. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. Golden light spread across the city. They'd survived. Barely. But they'd survived. Now came the hard part, living with what they'd done, and making sure Wesley Caro never hurt anyone again. Briar's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. "Knox is fed and sleeping. Take your time." Relief flooded through her. Her son was safe. Dante was alive. Wesley was in custody. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way. Because she'd learned something fundamental in that warehouse. She'd learned that she was capable of violence. That when pushed far enough, she could pull a trigger without hesitation. That some part of her, the part that had survived years of Wesley's abuse, was harder and colder than she'd ever imagined. And that scared her more than anything Wesley had ever done. Because she didn't recognize the woman who'd walked into that warehouse with a gun. The woman who'd chosen to fight instead of run. The woman who'd been willing to die to save someone else. That woman was a stranger. And Briar wasn't sure she wanted to know her. Dante's hand twitched in hers. His eyes flickered open, just barely, unfocused and glassy with painkillers. "Briar?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." She leaned closer. "You're okay. You're in the hospital. You're safe." "Knox?" "Safe." "Wesley? In custody. Under guard. Facing federal charges and attempted murder." Briar's throat tightened. "It's over, Dante." His eyes closed again. "Good." Then his breathing evened out, slipping back into unconsciousness. Briar sat back in the chair, still holding his hand, and let herself cry. For everything she'd lost, for everything she'd survived, For the impossible, terrifying truth that she'd fallen in love with a man whose world was built on violence and control and everything she'd been running from, but who'd given her something Wesley never had, a choice, and that choice had saved her life. Now she just had to figure out what to do with it. The sun rose higher, washing the hospital room in golden light, and somewhere across the city, in a prison cell or a hospital bed under police guard, Wesley Caro was planning his next move. Because men like Wesley didn't stop. They adapted, they waited, and they struck when you least expected it. Briar looked at Dante's battered face and made a promise. Whatever came next, whatever Wesley tried, she would be ready because she wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor, and survivors fought back. Dante woke 3 days later to find Briar asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed. Her head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck screaming, one hand still holding his. He didn't move, didn't want to wake her, because in sleep, the exhaustion that had carved lines into her face softened slightly. The bruises were fading from purple to yellow-green. The split in her lip was healing, but the shadows under her eyes told him she hadn't been sleeping much. He squeezed her hand gently. Her eyes opened immediately, alert in a way that told him she'd been sleeping light, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." His voice came out rough, scraped raw. "How long have I been out?" 3 days, on and off. She sat up straighter, wincing. "How do you feel?" "Like I got beaten half to death." "That's because you did." She reached for the water cup on the bedside table and held the straw to his lips. "The doctor said you're lucky to be alive." Dante drank, then pulled back. "Where's Knox?" "With Mrs. Chen at the estate. Safe. Heavily guarded." Briar set the cup down. "Marco's been running security like we're preparing for war." "Are we?" She didn't answer immediately, just looked at him with eyes that had seen too much too fast. "Wesley's been formally charged," she said finally. "Attempted murder, kidnapping, assault, plus the federal charges for embezzlement and wire fraud. His bail was revoked. He's being held without possibility of release pending trial." "So it's over." "Is it?" Briar's voice was quiet. "Because he's threatened me twice since being arrested. Through his lawyer, through other inmates. He says the moment he gets out, he's coming for Knox." Dante's jaw tightened. Pain shot through his fractured orbital bone. "He's not getting out." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He shifted carefully, every movement sending fresh waves of agony through his ribs. Men like Wesley don't survive in prison. They're too arrogant, too used to control. Someone will handle it. Briar stared at him. "You mean someone will kill him?" "I mean the problem will solve itself." Dante met her gaze. "Does that bother you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "It should. It should bother me that I'm sitting here hoping my husband dies in prison, that I'm relieved at the thought of him being murdered by another inmate." Her voice cracked. "What does that make me?" "Human. It makes me someone I don't recognize." "Good." Dante's voice was firm despite the pain. "Because the woman Wesley married wouldn't have survived what you just went through. She would have broken, given up, handed Knox over and disappeared into whatever hole Wesley dug for her. That woman still exists inside me." "No, she doesn't." Dante reached up with his free hand and touched her face gently, his fingers grazing the fading bruises. "That woman died the night you ran. What's left is someone stronger, someone who can survive anything." Tears slipped down Briar's cheeks. "I don't feel strong." "You pulled a gun on your abuser. You walked into a trap to save someone you barely knew. You chose to fight when every instinct told you to run." Dante's thumb brushed away her tears. "That's strength, Briar, even if it doesn't feel like it." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I was so scared." "I know. I thought he'd kill you." "He tried." Dante's voice went cold. "But I'm harder to kill than he expected." Briar opened her eyes. "What happened? In the warehouse before I got there?" Dante was quiet. The machines beeped steadily. Outside the window, clouds moved across a gray sky. "Wesley wanted information," he said finally, "about my businesses, my contacts, ways to disappear if things went bad. He thought torture would make me talk." Briar's breath caught. Dante. Oh, I didn't tell him anything. His voice was flat. Men like Wesley think violence is power, but they don't understand real violence. The kind that's patient, methodical, the kind that breaks people from the inside out. He paused. I've survived worse than anything Wesley Caro could imagine. Because of your work. Because of my life. Dante's eyes were distant. After Isabella died, I spent 5 years in a very dark place, learning how to hurt people, how to dismantle them piece by piece until nothing's left. Wesley's amateur hour compared to what I've seen. Briar pulled back slightly. Does that ever scare you? What you're capable of? Every day. The honesty in his voice surprised her. But it's also what kept me alive long enough to save you, Dante continued. So I can't regret it, even if I wanted to. A soft knock interrupted them. Marco appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but alert. Boss, he said, we need to talk. Dante gestured him inside. What happened? Wesley's lawyer filed a motion this morning claiming prosecutorial misconduct. Says the federal charges were fabricated to influence the custody case. Marco's expression was grim. He's also claiming that the evidence Vincent compiled was obtained illegally. Was it? Briar asked. Marco and Dante exchanged glances. Define illegally, Marco said finally. Briar's stomach dropped. You hacked his accounts. We found vulnerabilities and exploited them, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Not to a judge. Which is why Vincent covered our tracks very carefully. Dante's voice was calm. The evidence will hold up in court. Wesley's lawyer is grasping at straws. But what if it doesn't? Briar's hands were shaking. What if the charges get dismissed? What if... They won't. Dante's voice cut through her panic. Trust me, Briar. I've been doing this for 20 years. Wesley Caro is going to prison. The only question is for how long. Marco cleared his throat. There's something else. What? One of Wesley's security guards, the one who gave them the access codes to the estate, disappeared last night. Left behind his phone, wallet, everything, just vanished. Silence filled the hospital room. Briar looked between them. Did you him? No, Dante said firmly, but someone did. And I have a good idea who. Who? Other people Wesley betrayed when his empire collapsed. Dante shifted carefully, wincing. Investment partners who lost money, political contacts who got exposed. When a man like Wesley falls, he doesn't fall alone. He takes everyone with him, and some of those people are very good at making problems disappear. So Wesley's in danger, in prison. Wesley's been in danger since the moment he filed those federal charges, Marco said. He just doesn't know it yet. Briar wanted to feel something. Horror, guilt, anything. But all she felt was relief. 2 weeks passed. Dante was released from the hospital with orders to rest, physical therapy appointments, and enough painkillers to knock out a horse. He ignored most of the instructions and was back at the estate running his operations within 3 days. Briar stayed with Knox in the East Wing, trying to rebuild something resembling a normal life. But normal felt impossible now. She jumped at every sound, checked the locks on her door 5 times before sleeping, couldn't walk past windows without imagining Wesley standing outside, watching, waiting. Patricia filed for divorce on Briar's behalf. Emergency custody became permanent custody when Wesley's lawyer withdrew from the case, citing ethical concerns. The federal trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Everything should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. One morning, Briar found Dante in his study, staring at a laptop with an expression she couldn't read. "What's wrong?" she asked. He looked up. "Wesley's dead." The words hung in the air. Briar's legs went weak. She sank into a chair. "What?" "Stabbed in the prison yard this morning. Died before the guards could get him to medical." Dante's voice was carefully neutral. "Looks like another inmate had a grudge." "What kind of grudge?" "The kind money buys." Dante closed the laptop. Wesley made enemies in the wrong places. One of them paid someone on the inside to handle it. Briar couldn't breathe. "Did you?" "No." Dante's eyes locked onto hers. "I didn't order it, didn't pay for it, didn't even know it was happening. But I'm also not surprised." "Someone murdered him." "Yes." "And you're okay with that?" with, Dante was quiet for a moment. Am I supposed to feel guilty that a man who tried to kill both of us is dead? That a man who beat you, terrorized you, and would have destroyed your life if given the chance won't get that opportunity anymore? It's still murder. It's justice. Dante's voice was hard. The system failed you 4 times before you ran. Failed Isabella before she died. Failed countless other women who tried to escape and couldn't. So sometimes justice comes from other places. Darker places. And I'm not going to apologize for that. Briar's hands trembled. What do I tell Knox when he's older? That his father was murdered in prison? You tell him the truth. Dante stood and crossed to where she sat. That his father was dangerous. That you did everything you could to protect him. And that sometimes the world removes threats in ways we can't control. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you have. Dante crouched in front of her chair, bringing himself to eye level. Wesley's dead, Briar. You're safe. Knox is safe. And you get to build a life that doesn't include fear. Take it. Don't question it. Just take it. Tears burned her eyes. I should feel something. You do. You feel relief, and that's okay. Is it? Yes. Dante's voice was gentle. Because you survived. And survival means accepting that sometimes the end isn't pretty or clean or morally comfortable. It just is. Briar looked at him. This man who'd saved her life, nearly died for her, who understood darkness in ways she was only beginning to grasp. What happens now? She whispered. Now you live. Dante stood, offering his hand. Come on, Knox is awake. Mrs. Chen says he's been asking for you. Briar took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They walked through the mansion together, passing security guards and staff who nodded respectfully. The estate felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a home. They found Knox in the nursery, giggling while Mrs. Chen made faces at him. He looked up when Briar entered and his entire face lit up. Mama. The word hit Briar like a physical blow, his first word. She crossed the room and scooped him up, holding him close while tears streamed down her face. Yeah, baby, she whispered. Mama's here. Mama's always going to be here. Knox grabbed a handful of her hair and laughed. Dante watched from the doorway, something unreadable in his expression. Mrs. Chen excused herself quietly, leaving them alone. He's getting so big, Dante observed. He is. Briar kissed Knox's forehead. He's going to grow up safe, free, without fear. Yes, because of you. Because of both of us. Dante moved into the room, stopping a few feet away. You did the hard part, Briar. You ran. You fought back. You refused to give up. I just provided the resources. You provided everything. No, you already had everything you needed. Dante reached out and touched Knox's hand gently. The baby grabbed his finger immediately. You just needed to remember it. They stood together in the quiet nursery, watching Knox explore Dante's hand with fascinated concentration. What happens to us? Briar asked softly. After all this? Dante was quiet. What do you want to happen? I don't know. She looked up at him. I don't know how to navigate whatever this is. You saved my life. You're not Knox's father, but you've done more for him than Wesley ever did. You've given us safety and shelter and... Her voice caught. And I don't know what that means. It means you have a choice. Dante's voice was steady. You can stay here as long as you want, or you can leave and I'll make sure you have everything you need to start over somewhere else. New identity, money, security, whatever you want. And if I stay, then you stay. Dante's gray eyes searched hers. No expectations, no pressure, no strings. You and Knox have a home here for as long as you want it. What about you? What about me? Briar shifted Knox to one hip. You've built your entire life around protecting people like me. Women running from monsters. What happens when we're safe? When the threat's gone? Dante's expression was unreadable. I keep protecting you. Why? Because that's what I do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Dante pulled his hand away from Knox gently. You're asking me to define something that's undefined, Briar. We survived a nightmare together. That creates bonds that don't fit into neat categories. So we just exist in this undefined space? For now. Dante's voice softened. Until you figure out what you want, what you need, what kind of life you're trying to build. Briar looked down at Knox, who was starting to doze against her shoulder. I want him to grow up knowing he's loved, that he's safe, that the world isn't just violence and fear. Then that's what we'll give him. We? Dante met her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Briar. Not unless you ask me to. The weight of those words settled between them. I'm not asking you to leave, she said quietly. Good. Dante smiled slightly. Because I'm terrible at taking orders. 3 months passed. The federal trial concluded with guilty verdicts on all charges. Wesley's estate was liquidated to pay restitution to investors. His name became synonymous with fraud and corruption in business circles. The divorce was finalized posthumously. Briar legally changed her name back to Vale. Knox's birth certificate was amended to remove Wesley's name entirely. Patricia helped Briar file for full legal custody. There was no one left to contest it. Life settled into something resembling routine. Briar took over managing the estate's shelter program, working with women who arrived with nothing but fear and children who needed safety. She understood their terror in ways Patricia and Mrs. Chen never could. She could look them in the eyes and say truthfully, I survived. So can you. Knox grew, started crawling, developed a personality that was equal parts stubborn and sweet. He adored Mrs. Chen, tolerated Marco, and reached for Dante every time he entered a room. Dante ran his businesses with the same cold efficiency as always, but he was home more now, present in ways that made the estate feel less like a fortress and more like a family. Nobody discussed what that meant. They just lived it. One evening, Briar found Dante in the gardens at sunset, standing by the fountain where she'd first walked 6 months ago. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Just thinking. About? Isabella. He turned to look at her. Today would have been her birthday. Briar moved to stand beside him. Tell me about her. Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. She was fierce, stubborn, refused to back down from anyone. He smiled slightly. She would have liked you. You think? I know. You remind me of her sometimes. The way you fight. The way you refuse to let the world break you. He paused. She didn't get that chance. But you did. And watching you build a life after everything Wesley put you through. His voice trailed off. It helps. Helps what? The guilt. Dante's jaw tightened. For not saving her. For being too late. Briar reached out and took his hand. You saved me instead. That doesn't balance the scales. Maybe not. She squeezed his hand. But it matters. To me. To Knox. To every woman in that house who's alive because of what you built here. Dante looked down at their joined hands. Do you ever regret it? Getting in my car that night? No. Even knowing everything it cost? Briar thought about Wesley, the trial, the violence, the fear that still woke her some nights, heart pounding, checking locks. Especially knowing what it cost, she said. Because the alternative was dying slowly in that house. And this, she gestured toward the estate, toward the life she'd built. This is living. Dante turned to face her fully. In the fading light, his scars were visible. The one through his eyebrow, the new ones from the warehouse that would never fully fade. I need to tell you something, he said. Briar's heart skipped. Okay? I didn't plan on caring about you. His voice was raw, honest. You were supposed to be another person passing through, someone I helped and then let go. That's how this works. That's how I maintain distance. But you didn't leave. And Knox didn't leave. And somewhere in the last 6 months, you became... He stopped, searching for words. You became people I can't imagine not having in my life. Briar's breath caught. Dante, I'm not asking for anything, he interrupted. I'm not expecting you to feel the same way. You've been through hell. The last thing you need is someone else putting pressure on you. That's not what I was going to say. Then what were you going to say? Briar stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. I was going to say that I'm terrified, she whispered, because I spent 5 years with a man who made love feel like a cage, who turned affection into control and intimacy into violence, and the idea of caring about someone again, of being vulnerable with someone again. Her voice cracked. It scares me more than anything Wesley ever did. Dante's expression softened. Then we don't. What? If it scares you, we don't do it. His voice was firm. You set the pace. You decide what you can handle. And if the answer is nothing, if you need me to be just the person who provides safety and nothing more, that's fine. Why would you accept that? Because your healing matters more than my feelings. Dante touched her face gently. I can wait, Briar. However long it takes, or I can wait forever if that's what you need. Tears slipped down her cheeks. That's not fair to you. Life's not fair. We both know that. He brushed away her tears with his thumb. But this, whatever this is, doesn't have to follow anyone's timeline but yours. Briar looked up at him. This man who'd saved her life, who'd nearly died for her, who'd given her safety without demanding anything in return. What if I don't know what I need? She whispered. Then we figure it out together. Dante's voice was soft. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just this. Yeah, just this. Briar leaned into him slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. Dante's arms came around her carefully, protective without being constricting. They stood together in the gardens as the sun set and the stars emerged. Two people who'd survived monsters learning how to trust something gentle. It wasn't romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was real. And after everything, real was enough. 6 months later. Knox took his first steps in the estate's grand entrance hall, stumbling from Mrs. Chen to Briar and back again while everyone cheered. The shelter program expanded. They'd helped 43 women and 62 children escape abusive situations in the last year. Patricia was training a full legal team to handle the caseload. Dante's businesses continued thriving. He was careful now about what jobs he took, what clients he worked with. Some of the darker elements of his empire had been quietly dismantled. Marco got married, a quiet ceremony in the gardens with just family. The estate felt alive in ways it hadn't before. And Briar. Briar learned to sleep without checking the locks 5 times. Learned to let Knox play without hovering, terrified something would happen. Learned that not every man who raised his voice was a threat. Learned that healing wasn't linear or clean or quick. It was messy and slow, and some days she regressed, and some days she made progress, and most days she just survived. But she was surviving, and that was enough. One morning she stood on the terrace holding a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the gardens gold. Dante appeared beside her, offering her a blanket. Cold? He asked. A little. She wrapped it around her shoulders. Thank you. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up. Do you ever think about leaving? Dante asked quietly. Building a life somewhere else? Somewhere that doesn't have memories of everything you went through? Briar considered the question. Sometimes. But then I think about the women in that shelter, about showing them that escape is possible, that life after abuse exists. She looked at him. I think I need to stay. Not for you, not even for Knox. For me. Because leaving feels like Wesley wins, like he scared me so badly I couldn't stand to be anywhere he'd been. And staying? Staying means I survived him. Completely. She smiled slightly. Besides, Knox loves it here. Mrs. Chen spoils him rotten. Marco's teaching him terrible habits, and you... She paused. You make this place feel safe. Dante's expression was unreadable. Just safe? Is that not enough? It's more than enough. He turned to face her. But I need to know something. What? Are you staying because this is home? Or are you staying because you don't think you have anywhere else to go? Briar set down her coffee cup. I'm staying because for the first time in my entire adult life, I'm exactly where I want to be. With me. With you. With Knox. With this strange family we've built. She reached out and took his hand. I'm not going to pretend I'm not still healing, that I don't still have nightmares, that some days I don't wake up expecting Wesley to be standing over me. I know, but I also know that what we have here, Whatever this is, it's worth fighting for. Her voice was steady now. You asked me 6 months ago what I wanted. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now. What do you want? I want to build a life where Knox grows up knowing he's loved unconditionally, where women who've survived hell can find safety, where, she hesitated, where I can learn what love looks like when it's not twisted into something dark. Dante's eyes searched hers. And you think you can find that here? I think I already have. Briar stepped closer. I'm not asking you to fix me, Dante. I'm not asking you to be my savior or my hero or anything except yourself. But I'm asking if there's room in your life for something more than just protection. There's always been room, Dante said quietly. I was just waiting for you to be ready. I don't know if I'm ready. That's okay. He touched her face gently. We have time. Do we? Because in my experience, time runs out when you least expect it. Then we don't waste it. Dante leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, careful, nothing like the violence she'd known with Wesley. It tasted like sunrise and coffee and the promise of something neither of them could name yet. When they pulled apart, Briar was crying. Sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. Dante wiped away her tears. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. It's just... She laughed through the tears. That was the first kiss in 5 years that didn't make me want to run. Good. Dante pulled her close, holding her while she cried. That's really good. They stood together on the terrace, two damaged people learning how to be whole, while the sun rose higher and the world continued spinning. Inside the house, Knox woke and started calling for his mother. Briar pulled away from Dante reluctantly. I should... Go. He smiled. I'll make breakfast. You cook? Terribly. But Mrs. Chen's off today, so you're stuck with me. Briar laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep and honest. This should be interesting. She went inside to get Knox, who squealed with delight when she picked him up. Mama! Yeah, baby. Mama's here. She kissed his forehead. Let's go see what kind of disaster Dante's making in the kitchen. They found him struggling with a frying pan, smoke already rising from scrambled eggs that looked more like rubber. Knox giggled. Dante looked up, sheepish. I may have overestimated my abilities. Clearly, Briar set Knox in his high chair and moved to rescue the eggs. Step aside before you burn the house down. I can handle eggs. Evidence suggests otherwise. They fell into an easy rhythm, Briar cooking, Dante setting the table, Knox banging his spoon and providing commentary in gibberish that sounded very important. It was domestic, normal, exactly the kind of morning Briar never thought she'd have. When breakfast was ready, they sat together at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room, just the three of them in the warm morning light. This is nice, Dante said quietly. Yeah, Briar looked at Knox, who was systematically destroying his scrambled eggs by throwing them on the floor. It really is. Think we can make it last? I don't know. She met Dante's eyes, but I want to try. So do I. They ate breakfast while Knox entertained them with his destruction. Outside, birds sang in the gardens. Security guards patrolled the perimeter. The shelter prepared for another arrival. Life continued, messy and complicated and full of scars that would never fully heal, but also full of mornings like this. Quiet moments where survival transformed into something bigger, into hope, into the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the darkness they'd both survived could be balanced by light. Briar looked around the kitchen at the life she'd built from ashes and realized something profound. Wesley had tried to destroy her. He'd broken bones and shattered confidence and carved fear so deep she thought it would never leave. But he'd failed. Because she was still here, still fighting, still building, still learning how to live instead of just survive. And that, more than any revenge, more than any justice, was the real victory. She reached across the table and took Dante's hand. He squeezed back, understanding without words. Knox laughed, throwing another handful of eggs. And in that messy, imperfect, beautifully ordinary moment, Briar finally allowed herself to believe. She was free. Really, truly free. And the future, whatever it held, was hers to choose. No monsters, no cages, no fear, just the sunrise and the sound of her son laughing and the steady presence of a man who understood that sometimes salvation comes from the darkest places, that sometimes the people who save you are broken themselves, and sometimes healing looks like scrambled eggs and kitchen tables and the simple act of choosing every single day to keep living. Briar smiled, and for the first time in years, the smile reached all the way to her eyes.